The Muggle Death Eater and His Daughter by Great 78. Chapter 24. Daughters and Dalliances. Early July, 1996. The gala reception was every bit the lavish affair that the Grangers had attended 5 years before. Hermione was looking forward to it for many reasons. One, of course, was that she would be attending with Draco. The fanciful part of her daydreamed about a Yule Ball do-over, in which the two of them could dress up and dance together, instead of dancing around each other with scowls and hurt looks on their faces. But she was also looking forward to seeing her father and Draco's father interact. She had been mulling over the entire situation for days, ever since the confrontation at the Ministry. Unfortunately, her father had not been very forthcoming about the whole debacle. He only said that she should play along with anything that Lucius or Voldemort said, for all their safety. He had insisted that he had everything in hand, and that she needn't worry herself. He only wanted her to stay safe. He would not go into details as to how he came to be a double agent for the Order. She worried for her father. He was only a dentist, and such a kind-hearted one at that. She remembered moments in their dental practice over the years when a particularly piteous young patient would cry in fear of whatever procedure was needed. Her own father often grew misty-eyed along with the youngster. Hermione couldn't picture him as a spy or a secret agent. He just didn't have that level of guile, she thought. Dad was always such an open book. Draco came through the flue at about 5 minutes until 6 o'clock. "Ready?" Draco asked grimly, after exchanging greetings with the three of them. "Lead the way," Linda said, affixing a smile to her face. Hermione and her father watched the two of them disappear into the flue. Then he reached down lovingly for his daughter's hand, patting it as he rested her fingers in the crook of his elbow. "Chin up, Crabcake. Listen. Don't speak, unless you absolutely must. Stay agreeable." And with that, they followed Draco and Linda. Sissy's brat stepped through the flue, with a Muggle woman on his arm. Salazar's nutsack, Bellatrix thought. She never thought she'd see the day that the Malfoys would welcome a Muggle into their manor. The woman was petite, with shoulder-length brown hair swept to one side. A necklace and earrings of rubies glittered at her throat. Her cream-coloured dress was decidedly Muggle. That is to say, it showed plenty of skin, a fact that was not lost on the wizards in attendance. Bellatrix watched in disgust as Roll sucked in his gut, and Crabbe surreptitiously wiped his teeth to remove the bits of spinach and chicken within them. Draining her glass of fire whiskey, Bellatrix ignored the fact that no wizards had reacted that way when she entered the room in her satin-silver robes. Not that she cared, of course. There was only one wizard that she wished to impress, and his facial expression had not changed when the Muggle woman entered, except to lean forward in anticipation. Immediately behind them came the interloper, Richard, Voldemort's cousin, and the girl, Voldemort's daughter. But who was the girl's mother? Bellatrix recalled seeing a photo of Voldemort when he was young. He'd been quite a handsome young man, tall and thin, dark eyes, and he'd had the most luxuriously curly dark hair. Undoubtedly, he had likely had his pick of witches at one time. As Bellatrix stood across the room, casting a critical eye upon all three of them, her blood ran cold. The girl and the woman both had brown eyes. They stood about the same height and had the same build. Their hair was the same shade, although where the mother's was straight, the daughter's was curly. The same kind of curly that she had seen in a photograph of Voldemort when he was young. Was it possible? Would the Dark Lord have dirtied himself, sullied his wizarding purity by bedding this filthy Muggle woman? Still, Bellatrix could at least partly understand. It was clear that the Dark Lord was treating the interloper with kid gloves. It was almost as though this Richard fellow had something on the Dark Lord, something the man was threatening the wizard with. She would not doubt that, given the chance to fuck the man's wife and cuckold him, the Dark Lord would take it. As much as Bellatrix hated to think of it, it seemed a high probability. Bellatrix did not know any Muggles, but she had to assume that their world was much like that of wizards. Mothers did not give up their children easily. It was entirely possible that whilst Richard had been away on a mission for the Dark Lord, this disgusting Muggle had taken it upon herself to lay down with the Dark Lord and breed. There was nothing to be done for it. She needed to keep this woman and this girl away from the Dark Lord. It was bad enough that the interloper, Richard, was trying to take her place at Voldemort's right hand. The only thing that Bellatrix had that Richard did not was her sex appeal, and even that had always been questionable in the eyes of the Dark Lord. Voldemort had not been able to finish the deed with her years ago, but clearly he had been able to finish it with someone else, possibly the Muggle woman across the room. Bellatrix began to move forward, but found that she was not alone. At the same moment, both Lucius and Narcissa moved towards a small group. "Lord and Lady Granger, so lovely to see you again," Narcissa sparkled. Bellatrix turned and cast her a withering glare. Lord and Lady? Who the hell did Narcissa think she was fooling? These commoners were no more Lord and Lady than that insulting kitchen elf. "Narcissa, a pleasure to see you," the woman said warmly, and Bellatrix was incensed to see the two women exchange air kisses. Her own sister, greeting a Muggle as an equal. Lucius bowed low to the interloper. "Granger, so good to have you here," he murmured sycophantically. Richard nodded back and stuck out a hand. Lucius took it awkwardly. As the Muggle couple turned and greeted the other half of the Malfoys, Bellatrix noticed that Richard and Narcissa seemed to have a bit of a moment, wordlessly. The two of them exchanged meaningful glances. What was this, then? Bellatrix knew better than to think that Sissy would take up with another man. What were the two of them playing at? But it did not matter. Lucius was turning as though to introduce the Muggle woman to their colleagues, including the Dark Lord. This would not do. "Sissy, perhaps our guests would enjoy a tour of our library," Bellatrix suggested. Lucius looked incensed. He had been about to present the girl to Voldemort, and he also had told Bellatrix more than once to stop referring to Malfoy Manor as her own. Bellatrix smiled snidely at him. "That sounds lovely, actually," said Richard, with a glance at his daughter's barely contained excitement. "Richard, perhaps you'll stay with us whilst the others explore the library?" Lucius asked pointedly. Richard was his protection, because the man was not only a secret agent but also a family member of the Dark Lord. Richard had not been punished the way he, Bellatrix, and Dolohov had been after the failed mission in the Ministry. If Lucius could keep Richard on his good side, perhaps Lord Voldemort would be benevolent towards him. Richard reluctantly turned back to the men. "Of course." Hermione was enamored from the moment the group entered the library, just as Narcissa expected she might, based upon Draco's stories of her at school. Linda looked around, impressed by the grandeur of the place. "This is lovely, Narcissa." "Yes, Sissy always was bookish growing up. Father used to bring her a new book every time he went away for work." Bellatrix eyed Linda mistrustfully. "Oh, I hadn't realized. Are you sisters?" Linda asked in surprise. They had, of course, spoken on the way to the library, the three women. Pleasantries. How are you? What a lovely dress. Your necklace is beautiful. The usual niceties that women were wont to exchange. Bellatrix had not participated much, only nodding her thanks when the compliments were given to her. But it did not escape her notice that Narcissa had not followed up her introduction. "Linda, this is Bellatrix," with the next part, "my sister." A part of Narcissa's heart ached to think of Bellatrix for very long, or very deeply. For many years, Bellatrix had not been a good part of her life. She had been in Azkaban, and before that she had followed the Dark Lord off of the cliff of normalcy. The Bellatrix that Narcissa had known as a child was at best precocious, at worst sinister. Best kept at arm's length, to be sure. But as they had grown, Bellatrix had either gotten better at masking her diabolical side, or she had outgrown it. Narcissa could never be certain. However, she recalled the years at Hogwarts as some of the better ones in her sister's shadow. It was true they were several years apart. Bellatrix was beginning her 5th year when Narcissa was sorted into Slytherin House. But Narcissa remembered the feeling of pride that she had, watching her older sister navigate life as an upperclassman. All of that went away the year after Bellatrix finished school and joined the Dark Lord's movement. She returned at holidays, spreading Voldemort's message, a message that Narcissa's longtime beau, Lucius, took to like a Grindylow to a swimmer. Before he had even graduated, Lucius was angling for invitations to meetings with the Dark Lord. And then Lucius was lost to her, just like Bellatrix had been. Even the night of their wedding, her new husband, her wizard, had disapparated away to answer Voldemort's call. "Yes, Bellatrix and I are sisters," Narcissa said, with forced gaiety. "How nice. I've always longed for a sister. I had a brother, but he was older than me. We were close when we were young, but he moved to America several years ago. I've only seen him a few times since Hermione was a baby." "Pity," Bellatrix said brusquely. "So, Linda, Lucius tells me your daughter was an orphan. Did you know her father well?" Linda looked uncomfortable. "Yes, we met a few times." "What was he like?" "Sorry?" "The father of your daughter. What was he like?" Very nice, I suppose. To be honest, we didn't speak much. He was rather busy, you see. Well, that was to be expected, of course. He had a very high-ranking job." Narcissa could tell that her friend was uncomfortable with the line of questioning. "Well, none of that really matters. Hermione is a lovely girl, all her own right." "Thank you, Narcissa. That's very kind of you to say. We're quite proud of our little Hermione." Bellatrix fixed her sister with a glare. "And you, Bellatrix, you have children, do you not?" Linda asked in confusion. At these words, Bellatrix grew incensed and stormed out of the library, slamming the door magically behind her. "Did I say something wrong? Does she not have a child?" Children are rather a sore point for Bellatrix. Why do you think she has a child?" Linda looked around carefully. The teenagers were further in the stacks, and appeared that Bellatrix was gone for now. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think of it. When I realized you two were sisters, I only assumed. Oh, that was foolish of me. Of course you can have more than one sister." It was Narcissa's turn for confusion. "What do you mean?" "I've been in contact this week with a relation of yours. I'm not sure if you know of her. Her name is Nymphadora." Hermione grabbed him by the hand seconds after they entered the room and pulled him down the center aisle of the library. The Malfoy library was more compact than the library at Hogwarts, of course, but what it lacked in space, it more than made up for in content. It stretched 3 stories high, the upper balconies reachable by 2 small spiral staircases at opposite corners of the space. The white walls were adorned with gilt filigree, which glowed under the magical sconces and chandeliers spaced throughout. At the back wall of each level stood an enchanted fireplace, wreathed by plush green and gold armchairs and sofas. The space was warm and inviting, and Draco could tell that if Hermione wasn't convinced that he was the right wizard for her before, she was certainly convinced now. "This is beautiful," she said, spinning around dizzyingly after sprinting up the nearest staircase for the next floor. He watched her, eyes alight in wonder, soft curls gathered against their will in a straining clip at the nape of her neck. Her dress of blue teal seemed to swirl around her like water, setting off the early summer glow of her skin. She was right. This sight was beautiful. "So are you," he said, so quietly that she could not hear, his eyes never leaving her. "How many books do you suppose?" "I've never counted. 500,000.
500,000, do you think?"
"Possibly." He smiled, swinging her around to face him. "Are you only after me for my books, Granger?" He put his arms around her waist, pulling her close.
"I'll admit it does sweeten the pot a bit," she chuckled,
putting her hands on his shoulders. He tilted his head, leaning down to kiss her softly. He loved the feel of her in his arms, the smoothness of her skin, the sprinkle of freckles on her shoulders. He kissed her lips, then her neck, as she tilted her head up and back to allow him room to work his magic. After a moment, he smiled against her skin. "I can tell you're trying to read titles over my head." She laughed, caught. "I can move lower, if it lets you see better," he continued flirtatiously, kissing a spot just below her collarbone that made her giggle.
"No, our mothers are downstairs."
"The Dark Lord is in the drawing room, but what should we do? Just not live our lives?"
She gasped suddenly. "Oh my goodness! He is, isn't he? I didn't even think."
"It's all right. He isn't going to bother us. Your father and my father are here. It's just a reception, just dinner, a bit of dancing. Nothing to be concerned about."
"I hope you're right."
Her copper eyes stared into his silver ones.
"For all our sake."
Richard eyed Voldemort carefully, trying to size up his mood. He could tell that Lucius and several of the other men looked quite nervous, which was not usually a good sign. Had there been words already? "May I offer you a drink?" Lucius asked, gesturing to the fully stocked bar in the corner. An elf stood behind it, looking eagerly at Richard for his order.
"Just a soda water, with lime, thanks,"
Richard said to the elf, who quickly began filling a crystal glass with ice.
"We were just discussing the conundrum of Hogwarts," Voldemort said. "There has been a deplorable lack of standards in the institution as of late."
Richard nodded, but said nothing.
"I feel that our youth must be taught properly, and I fear that Albus Dumbledore is spreading mistruths about my plans for the future. We must devise a remedy for this."
Richard and the others nodded thoughtfully. The woman called Bellatrix stomped back into the room. Richard eyed her carefully. She was certainly one to keep an eye on. A loose cannon with a short fuse.
"So, Richard," Voldemort said, How is your daughter enjoying Hogwarts? I assume she is in Slytherin House.
Geez, no. She's a Gryffindor.
There was a collective intake of breath around the room. Voldemort looked long and hard at the man.
A Gryffindor?
Lucius spoke up.
It is our belief that she is there to infiltrate Harry Potter's inner circle and make it easier for him to be defeated, my lord. It is my understanding that she confounded the Sorting Hat. She is quite powerful, you know. Well, that's no surprise, knowing who her father is.
Well, if anyone was able to infiltrate Potter's inner circle, it would be this man's daughter, Voldemort thought. After all, Richard had done the same to his circle. Still, to know that his cousin's daughter was in the school, working for him, it was strangely heartwarming. Particularly strange, considering that, to be honest, Voldemort was uncertain if he still had a heart. The whole Horcrux thing, followed by the restorative ceremony, had really created some strange outcomes, physically, for him. He found that he preferred to go barefoot now. Shoes felt restrictive, and now when he breathed, he seemed to be taking in a lot of air. More than once, whilst eating, a bit of soup had splashed up into his vertical nose holes. It was, to be frank, disturbing. He had considered a bandage so that no one would look at it, but he was afraid it would draw more attention to it. And when he tried a bandage, it had made his voice sound funny. Best ignore the whole flat nose holes situation and pretend like it was on purpose. The conversation had continued around him, and Voldemort turned back to the group. They appeared to be waiting for him to speak. He cleared his throat.
I am pleased to know that I have her allegiance as well. And, Lucius, how is your son finding Hogwarts?
He seems to be finding it quite, enjoyable. At least, from what I can tell, my lord, piped up Bellatrix. He's quite good friends with young Hermione.
A few of the men leered at each other knowingly. Voldemort shuddered imperceptibly. He thought back to his own years at Hogwarts. The girls had followed him around, much the same as they likely followed young Draco. He had found it off-putting and confusing. Voldemort could never truly understand sexual urges. He himself had never had them. The one time that Bellatrix had managed to corner him and convince him to lay with her had been so highly disturbing that even now thought of it made him feel ill. Flashback. Christmas, 1978. She had pulled him away from the party, offering some sort of special favor. They entered a bedroom in Malfoy Manor, and she led him to the bed. She suggested to him that he lie back whilst she took off her clothes, exposing her hot, clammy skin that smelled oddly of fruit and musk. Something about the smell made him think of the orphanage, making the entire situation worse. Perhaps Bellatrix's perfume had been the same as old Mrs. Cole's, or perhaps it was just the smell of blackberries and gin that united them in his mind. Bellatrix had taken his hand and run it along the slit in her body. He was highly disorientated, frozen with confusion. He had never seen a girl or a woman without clothes, even in photographs. He truly thought everyone looked the same under their robes. The thing between his legs looked nothing like this. He worried irrationally for a moment that she had cut hers off or lost it somehow.
He had tried to pull away, but she insisted he touch the gash. It had been wet and sticky. He tried and failed to keep the look of disgust off his face. Bellatrix kept frowning at his dick, touching it roughly, tugging on it, even as he slapped her hands away. When his dick had not gotten hard, Bellatrix said not to worry, she knew a spell. When the spell took effect, Voldemort spent most of the next few minutes staring in fascination at his rigid dick, whilst Bellatrix grinded and licked him. It had never done this before. He had assumed that its sole purpose was to aim the stream of urine. But when she asked him to put it inside of her, inside of that wet, sticky thing, it had been too much. She was sitting astride him, holding her body up above his rigid dick, about to plunge downwards. Just as the tip of his dick disappeared inside of her, a new irrational fear occurred to him. What if she was about to take his dick to replace the one she had lost? He raised his hand and wordlessly pushed her away. Her pale body crumpled to the floor across the room.
"What was that for?"
she bellowed at him.
"Enough! We are done here!"
he thundered at her, closing his robes and getting up to leave.
"Venite incantatem,"
he said to his dick, which softened immediately. He hurried back to the Malfoy ballroom, where grating holiday orchestral music spilled out into the grounds. He'd rather listen to that than be in a room alone with Bellatrix anymore.
Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Muggle Death Eater by Great78.